And looking back now, do you still look at it the same way, or has it completely changed for you now?
It has, yes, because it took me, like I said, I just never understood what grace was all about. You know,
Mm-hmm.
grace to me was just a religious term that everybody talked about, and it was, nice to know. But like a lot of religious terms, we know the talk, we know the language, we know
Mm-hmm.
all of the stuff, but the reality of it, I think, not just with me, but with many people, is we don't know what it means and we don't know how to apply it. And I think for me, the day that I understood what grace was, I used to get this I sometimes look at it as a silly little bit of an acronym where it was God's riches at Christ's expense.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice, and it's a nice little thing, but it still just made no sense to me. What does that mean? But again, knowing the words, but I think it was when I finally learned that I have never and never will be good enough in the eyes of God. It has nothing to do with my goodness. I can be the best person in the world and I'm still unacceptable to God. I can be the worst criminal in the world and I'm on an equal footing. It was only when I really began to grasp that the meaning of grace was that my righteousness is in Christ alone. He took all my guilt, all my sorrow, all my brokenness, and everything to do with me. And although my life is still a work in progress, I'm still being changed and transformed and learning stuff all of the time. I no longer, it's not as though I live recklessly. I know some people can pick that up. I will live as well as I can, but I know even there it's not good enough. But
Mm-hmm.
I thank God on a regular basis that it is not my goodness that saves me, so to speak. It is the finished work of Jesus Christ who took it all on himself and has declared me guilt free. And
Amen.
I have to remind myself frequently that whenever I go through bad patches, and I do, even as a pastor of a church, when I go through bad patches, I just look towards the heavens and say, thank you so much, Lord, that my only hope in eternity is standing in the righteousness of Christ. That is my hope of faith.
Excellent. Now you got involved with these addicted hippies and preaching Jesus.
Yeah.
Did you go out in the streets with them as well and preaching? And how did that make you feel?
I think what they never knew, George, is that I didn't even know if I was a believer at the time. I may have said that prayer, but my motivation behind saying it is I thought I would wake up almost like a magic wand had been waved over me that night. But I think, George, I don't know if you remember that in Johnstown, we may have met in the building at whatever time it was, but no sooner had we walked in the doors when everybody was up the streets to win the world for Jesus, sort of thing.
Yep, absolutely.
And of course, I inevitably got brought with them. And most of the time I was thinking, what in heaven's name am I doing here? I'm not even sure I want to be with these guys.
Thanks very much, Paddy.
The worry was people are going to see me.
Yeah.
There was all that side of it. But yet, even at that particular point, the memory that has always stood out to me is that I didn't even know if I was a believer at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know what a Bible looked like at the time. And yet when I was trying to share the faith that I actually didn't know whether I had or not with people on the street, every question they asked me, I still remember, and most people won't believe this, but when I actually opened a Bible that somebody who had given me, there was the answer to their question right in front of me. I'm not making that up. I looked each time somebody asked me a question that I had no answer, and I wasn't even sure, am I seeing this right? There was the answer. It was like as though the Holy Spirit was doing his work, regardless of what sort of whether I was still a pagan or not. So,
Okay, yeah, that's really good, actually. And how did the family react, if they did react at all?
I think, normally speaking, when I arrived home, there was this. Of course, there was this thing in Ireland that dominated for quite some time. Is that if you were not a Catholic, you must have been a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness, and that was the big struggle, that they didn't want a Jehovah's Witness in their family. And of course, I was trying to say that I'm not even entertaining that. But I think there was the usual response that it was completely negative. But I just decided, when I eventually became clear, rather, on my decision that I wanted to be a follower of Jesus, I decided to make a stand at home, that even if it meant that if I got put out on the street, fair enough, I'll figure some way. So I went down to, I think I went down to what used to be a Christian bookshop on the
On the
Keys,
key, yeah.
on the Keys in Waterford, and I bought myself a number of Christian posters, and I decided to put them up around my bedroom one time. And
I mean, the one with the finger pointing one way, yeah?
there was one of those there. I don't remember what the others were, but I remember going out to work that the morning after I did that, and thinking that when I go home, I'm going to be, as we used to say, murdered. But when I got there was just silence, and then after a while it was, what's with all these posters? And when I explained, they just seemed to accept it. I think because they figured I was not backing down. I was stubborn, very, very stubborn back then, and many people will say I'm still very stubborn. And sometimes I honestly believe that that's why God picked me, because I knew I wouldn't give up easy. I would be if I'm in for a fight, I will stay in the fight until we see it through. But thankfully, for me, I know people who were thrown out of their homes and put out of their homes during that time, but I wasn't one of them. I wasn't.
There was one night there, Paddy. You may not remember it, but there was one night I was actually at. We were having a meeting in the flat in Johnstown, and my mum and dad knocked on the door. The door opened up, and they pulled me out of the meeting and dragged me home because they didn't want me to be in there. Can you recall any incidents like that happened for you?
Not for me. I'd heard about your story, George. Okay, but I obviously wasn't there on the night. Maybe I was hiding somewhere else myself. But I do remember being there one or two nights when others, the parents, came and actually took them, forcefully away. But at the time we just saw it as persecution for, the name of the Lord and for standing up for Jesus. But in saying that, I saw, while we were doing stuff up around I think it was around the Regina, Savoy Cinema rather. There was sometimes we used to be down there speaking, and I know that one night I was speaking to a guy I knew where he actually physically assaulted me, for the sake of better words. But there was also nights when if you remember, George, we were out in Tramore doing speaking to people and doing what we used to call the open airs and that. And I do remember seeing one or two of our lads being physically attacked by guys who were. It was that early night when I think it was the Atlantic Ballroom was just there, not too far, and of course everybody were heading there, and they had their fill, so to speak. So by default, they were ready for aggression, one way or the other. But of course, I think a lot of the time, because of I honestly believe, looking back at some of that, I think it had more to do with the Irish Catholic nationalism stood solid with a lot of that. And, we were still, I suppose, realistically in the infancy of our independence, and the power of the Catholic Church and the nationalism was still so strong that, being seen as a traitor to it was the real reason people did what they did. Because as I learned later when I came up to Carlow and met a number of Christians, it was Christians from, if you like, the proddy side of things.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, in their eyes, I was seen as one of those guys that come from that heathenistic Catholic side. And I was thinking, no, I'm not a practicing Catholic anymore. But on one side, I was seen as a traitor. On the other side, I was seen as a problem. So you just felt you were caught in the middle of a crossfire, and left me asking myself, well, where do I go from here? But I realized that the most important thing to me was not whether it was a Protestant or Catholic. I wanted nothing to do with any of that stuff. I just wanted to be a follower of Jesus.
I heard you preach not so long ago, and you mentioned that again, a follower of Jesus, because you see yourself that there are millions of people calling them Christians, but you want to call it. What makes you think you should call yourself a follower of Jesus rather than a Christian?
I think it's because when we use that Christian term, it always bothered me, for one reason only, in that you speak to somebody trying to share if you like, the gospel of Christ and how it can work and transform your life. And if I use the term I'm a Christian, that the usual response is, well, we're Christians too. And when I looked and researched and thought a lot about it, I discovered that, like my childhood upbringing, everybody was a Christian, but they certainly didn't behave like it. But if this is the definition of Christianity, what is actually wrong with it? But I think the thing was, how then do you make the distinction as to how you become clear on what it is you're trying to share with people? And it's when I did a study of the New Testament, it became very, very clear to me that Jesus, for example, never referred to any of his followers as Christians. They were referred to as his disciples all the time. They were disciples of Christ. And sometimes when the gospel writers were referring to them, they referred to them as his disciples. And when I looked it up, I discovered there's only two real references, well, three, depending on how you look at it, but two of them are meant to be insulting terms. Both the Christians were the believers were first called Christians at Antioch, but it was intended to be a derogatory term and to insult the people, just almost like saying that lot over there, those Greeks over there. And at the same time, the other one was when, I can't remember which one it is. I think it was Agrippa that Paul was witnessing to when he was on trial, or Festus. I don't remember off the top of my head which one it was. But his response is, do you think in such a short time I should become a Christian? And Paul's response was, no, I would like you to become like me. And what is that? Paul called himself a follower of Jesus Christ. But I think, whichever one of it is, I think it was Agrippa. But what he was really saying is, are you trying to convert me to be somebody like you? Do you really think I should become one of you? But in the New Testament, when I actually researched it, there's both the plural and the singular term is referred to over 300 times when it comes to disciple or follower in the New Testament, and the term Christian is there twice in derogatory terms, and once from, I think it's James or maybe Peter. Again, mental block has referred to it.
Now, Now, you, of course, you were with these young hippies, addicted people for a number of years, and I think it fizzled out about 1978, 79. So, where did your life turn from there, about 79 or so?
I actually left Waterford in 1976 to come to Carlow, and um, I think the whole Jesus movement, as I knew it, had been breaking up and fragmenting for all sorts of reasons, and I was still living through uncertainty myself at the time, and that's why when I got the job in Carlow, I really did believe that I was escaping from everything and getting away from everything to do with people and that I knew, and even down with faith itself, because of what I saw. And what I had no idea that was happening is that, I was introduced to a definition of Christian that was even worse. And, it was far more difficult to kind of live in this crossfire territory for the few years. And I left Carlow in 79 actually, and I went back home to Waterford, except it felt as though, I was back, but everyone that I knew was gone. But yet there was something in my heart was just I just couldn't, even though I wanted to get away from Carlow, there was something compelling me to go back there. And at the time, I didn't quite understand what that was.
What was the job you had in Carlow? What did you do in Carlow?
I was training in engineering and tool making as such. So that was the job. A company called Lappel, who made die casts and paneling for new model cars for various different car manufacturers. So that's what I worked at there.
Now, I'm going to ask you a personal question here, Paddy. Okay, how did you fare out with women in your life in the early days?
Well, I think that was one of the big struggles that I had for many years because of, I suppose, the segregation in school. They were a strange species. But I was just scared silly. But there was also a side of me that was scared silly of the idea of getting serious about even relationships as such, because looking at my own home and looking at stuff around me, I just considered, if this is the definition of marriage, then I just don't want to go there. So again, I was afraid of it, but my low self-worth and self-esteem, always, when I met women in the early years, it was just an absolute struggle to even know how to talk to them, let alone. It was almost like an alien species. I would love to explain myself better on that, George. But the problem was more with me than it was with them. But in due course, of course, part of the learning curve was so much of it, even through some of the relationships I was with. Everything was about. I really believe, looking back on it all, much of it was learning about me. And it was the Lord bringing stuff into my life and teaching me lessons about myself, even down to the stuff that didn't work out, turned nasty. And I was in one or two relationships that turned quite nasty, supposedly again from Christian backgrounds, but it was unaccepting parents, because I came from a riff-raff background, all that kind of stuff. And I didn't believe such a thing would happen if somebody was Christian. But however, again, look, it was part and parcel of the journey, part and parcel of teaching me about me and my responses, teaching me the journey I had to do. And, it came to the point then where I met the girl who became my wife, and that is Heather, who accepted me from the word go. Her parents accepted me from the word go. And even where I fell short in the confidences and everything I was speaking about, they are the ones who taught me how to become me to the best that they could. But subsequently, was the changing. It was meeting the person that God intended, and
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have seen it quite like that at the time, because I'll straight up say it was just another relationship at the time. Until I can now look back for many reasons and realize that this was all pre-planned.
So when you went to Carlow, did you seek fellowship with Christians, or did you just go and work up there, or what did you
I
do?
I did my best to avoid them when I went to Carlow, George, but again, I had no idea that my even applying for a job that I thought was getting me away from Christians, away from home, was actually putting me right into the nest where God wanted me to be. I had no idea that. I think if I'd have known what I know today, I would have fled and maybe gone to Cork or something like that, which I know is criminal for Waterford, man. But yeah, but I really had no idea that heaven itself was probably laughing at what they were listening to me saying at the time, you know.